What's up, boxing fans? Back with another video, and here we're talking about Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, Shakur Stevenson, William Zepeda, and what we learned from this weekend of boxing. Let's break it down. So first off, we're gonna start with the Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor bout and what we learned from that fight. So, upon watching the Katie Taylor Amanda Serrano fight, first we must about the massive card and some of the things that happened on this card, the notable things that took place on this card promoted by MVP, which is Jake Paul's promotional company, right? And one thing to notice before we talk about the Amanda Serrano Katie Taylor fight is what Green did. Miss Green beat Savannah Marshall. Savannah Marshall is a very seasoned fighter who fought Clarissa Shields, who's a good measuring stick. Savannah Marshall is for Green. And Green said that Savannah Marshall told her that she could crack and that she could crack harder than Clarissa Shields and that she would give Clarissa Shields a lot of trouble. Miss Green called out Clarissa Shields after the fight, in which Jake Paul reluctantly said, "We'll beat Clarissa Shields." I think Jake Paul doesn't have any female fighter in his stable capable of beating Clarissa Shields. Now that Katie Taylor beat Amanda Serrano, claimed the GOAT. She lost to a particular fighter 3 times. There is no GOAT claims. Amanda Serrano came up short in that fight. We seen a lot of just throwing her hands for no reason, right? Katie Taylor wasn't even in distance to be hit, and we would see Amanda Serrano throwing false punches, right? Just throwing them almost to keep Katie Taylor at bay or to stay busy. She was throwing false combinations that you would see when you're hitting the pads or in sparring. And it wasn't like she was trying to time Katie Taylor with these false combinations. She was merely trying to stay busy, and it looked amateurish. Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor's third fight seemed to be a glorified sparring match. We've seen a lot of jabs and straights, not very many power punches. So it makes me wonder if they were, particularly Amanda Serrano, was just taking that fight for the money. And it was that a retirement fight for Amanda Serrano. So Clarissa Shields and MVP will do business together in future endeavors. That's what I could grab from that fight card promoted by Jake Paul. And Jake Paul reluctantly will do business with Clarissa Shields and probably likely look to underpay Clarissa Shields in relation to what he's paying his other female fighters in his stable. But let's carry on. Now let's talk about the Shakur Stevenson William Zepeda fight. What I noticed was this. Shakur Stevenson helped William Zepeda cut off the ring. Shakur Stevenson helped William Zepeda cut off the ring. Before the fight, we heard the no engagement, no running rule that Showbiz the Adult constantly pushed for. We've seen Turkey out, she trolling Shakur Stevenson leading up to the fight, telling him not to run, better not run, and this, that, and the third. We seen for a more or less stable Shakur Stevenson who wasn't moving as much. He was just as engaged as he was in prior fights. if you disregard that when De Los Santos fight, Shakur Stevenson was just as busy as he was in any other fight. But here's the kicker. Shakur Stevenson, every round, would put himself in the corner. Every round, the beginning of the round, he would go into the corner and allow William Zepeda to fight him. He helped William Zepeda cut off the ring. He fought against the ropes and in the corner for majority of the fight. As we seen in the later part of the fight, when Shakur Stevenson decided to move his feet and become more mobile, the fans booed right away. And we seen Shakur Stevenson could easily fight that style. And after seeing the fans boo, he decided to go to the corner and allow William Zepeda to punch him. Most of those punches hitting shoulder and forearm. Shakur Stevenson exposed William Zepeda. Shakur Stevenson exposed the no running rule, and the rule will merely always get exposed because these are ring generals. No matter the size of the ring, no matter what their opponent calls for, they will always dominate the fight because they know how to use that ring. If you tell them to stop using their legs, they will use the corners and dominate you in the corners. Roy Jones is known for that. Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather, these are all defense fighters. They all are very great at using the whole ring, the ropes, the corners, grabbing you, using their legs. They are just merely better boxers. And until these aggressive styles start to learn the defensive arts of boxing, they will always be handicapped. They will always come up short against defensive fighters who are more clever. And we will always see them get outboxed and claim the opposing fighter ran, because they don't understand the small things when it comes to boxing, in that it's just as much defensive as it is offensive. The art of boxing, not the art of offense, not the art of defense, the art of boxing, meaning you put two guys or two gals in a square circle with gloves on their fists and allow them to use the whole ring. For that's the luxury of the sport. It has a ring with ropes and the boxer's right to use the whole ring. When a boxer decides to be a ring general, as most defensive fighters do, they will be masters in that ring when it comes to the sport of boxing. And it's nothing a promoter could do. It's nothing a fan could do. It's nothing anybody could do, even the referee, to stop that fighter from dominating. And we seen Shakur Stevenson just do that. They stacked the cards against him. They tried to make up rules. They tried to put the pressure on him to fight. Fans tried to boo when he decided to move his legs, and yet he still dominated. Let this be an indicator of what's to happen with Terrence Crawford and Canelo. Because when Canelo comes up short, mark my words, fans will say Crawford was on snack and he cheated. Fans will say a lot of the things they are saying with the William Zepeda fight. The people are delusional. They think William Zepeda won the fight. So fans are delusional when their favorite fighter loses, typically. And that's what I with the Canelo Crawford fight. But it was a lot to unpack from that weekend. As I said, Berlanga is all talk, no bite. He was talking crazy to Oscar De La Hoya, and his career pales in comparison. Berlanga is a journeyman, essentially. I remember when Berlanga was getting hyped, anybody who knows boxing could see he was a constructed hype job. 16 straight knockouts. Yeah, that's mad impressive. But when you look at the opponents, you realize it was constructed. As far as I know, every prospect in their first 16 fights or so will have about 12 knockouts in those 16 fights. Granted, 16 knockouts, 16 first round knockouts is mad impressive. Nonetheless, Berlanga's a front runner. He starts strong, but when those mid and those late rounds hit, he gets exposed because he's not a boxer, he's a puncher. So we gotta know how to make these predictions, guys. Anytime you get a boxer versus a puncher, the boxer will majority of the time always win. That's majority of the time, especially when that boxer is special. You know, the the popular wording that people use when regarding this boxer, if they say he's special or a great boxer or a thinker or can make adjustments, typically those are indicators that when you put that boxer in the ring with a puncher, he'll be able to exploit that puncher's weaknesses. And that puncher won't look like a puncher. He'll look like a punching bag. And that's what happens when you put a boxer in there with a puncher. The puncher turns into a punching bag, ironically. So these things are to be considered. We see it all the time. History repeats itself. The great boxer typically beats the great puncher, and the great puncher typically gets exposed, and people start to look at that great puncher as a good puncher and not so great. This is what happens. Somebody has to get exposed when you put two fighters in the ring. And typically the smarter of the two is doing the exposing. So yeah, man, that's what I got with the Shakur Williams Zepeda fight. Shakur cut off the ring to help Williams Zepeda to make it look more like a fight. Shakur allowed it to look more like a fight. He didn't have to stand there. He could have moved around as he showed in the fight, but the fans booed. He decided to stand there and fight. And the fans loved that fight. They loved that type of fight. And Shakur made that decision because of the pressure. And it could have looked a lot more one-sided, with Shakur extremely outboxing. And he did that. But it could have looked even more boring to the fans' eyes, but even more of a dominant performance from Shakur Stevenson. Whereas William Zepeda would not even be able to reach him if he decided to use his legs. We are in the era of handicapping a defensive boxer, right? And not allowing them to use their legs, the luxury of using their legs. Because the fans will boo. They will just boo you, right? If a boxer starts boxing early in the fight and using his legs, they'll boo. And likely the judges will favor the opposing guy in the Turkey Al-Sheikh promoted event as they favor volume over boxing, as we see with David Morrell getting the victory in the robbery and the other fight being the robbery. They favored volume. But in the Shakur Stevenson fight, it was such a masterclass, they had to favor boxing. So these are just things to consider. If he would have used his legs early on in that fight, the judges may have favored William Zepeda in those early rounds, even if Shakur was outboxing him. So these are things to consider. So that's just to summarize. Shakur cut off the ring. He helped William Zepeda cut off the ring by literally going into the corner at the beginning of every round and laying against the ropes. And that was a decision Shakur consciously made when he could have made a conscious decision to use his legs more. Instead, we seen Shakur walking around the ring slowly. That was the only difference. He fought just as much as he fights in any other fight. He threw his hands just as much as he usually does. But he walked instead of essentially running in the ring or being quicker with his footwork, right? And being more elusive. He chose not to be as elusive. That was the difference. And he put himself in the corner and allowed William Zepeda to throw punches and pick them apart. Because I tell you something, guys. Defensive fighters are comfortable fighting against the ropes. Defensive fighters are comfortable fighting in the corner, and defensive fighters are comfortable using that whole ring. That's the bottom line. And the only thing we didn't see from him is him using his legs. But he used everything else in his arsenal. And because his legs allow him the luxury of not being able to use those other things, we got to see more of those things than we usually get to see in a Shakur Stevenson fight. More so than we usually get to see it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Shakur. All I see from Shakur is Shakur taking one step back and picking you apart, throwing combinations, and really being a hard guy to even touch while touching you the whole time. In this fight, he was an easy guy to touch while touching Zepeda the whole time. But he was hard to actually hit flush. Easy to touch. You could touch him in the arms and the body all day, but hard to hit flush. So, masterclass defensively, it should be studied. He stood right in front of Zepeda, and early in the fight, Zepeda did a good job. I love when Zepeda was stabbing to the body. Zepeda could have won the fight if he would have stabbed to the body continuously. If he would have stabbed to the body continuously, and after about the fourth round, Zepeda needed. I remember in the pre-fight interview, Shakur said he doesn't have B, he doesn't have C, D he could go to. He only has A. And that's what happened in the fight. Zepeda had his A game plan, but he couldn't go to B, C, or D. Interesting. Zepeda did it good with his volume. He did good with his jab to the body, but he didn't have B and C. What was B and C? B and C would have been the combinations he was throwing, right? The type of punches he was throwing, the angles, the overhand, Gennady Golovkin overhand, different punch variation. He didn't show any unorthodox punch variation like a Maidana. That would have been another element. What Castillo did to Floyd, what Maidana did to Floyd, these looping punches, these wild punches, wrestling. He didn't bring that dynamic to the fight. That would have been his B. William Zepeda's A was enough to make the first 4 rounds quite even, but his B would have been enough to win those middle rounds. He needed a B and a C. So when you look at William Zepeda, when going back to the drawing board, learning from the Shakur fight, he should try to add looping punches to his arsenal. He has the volume, but he has the volume, and that's a great thing from William Zepeda. The volume, that's very great, the punch volume. But where is the punch variation, the different type of punches? The Maidana-esque punches, the Gennady Golovkin-esque punches, the Jose Luis Castillo-esque punches, the Sean Porter-esque punches. Where are the strategic combinations and strategic punch counts, punch variations? You have the volume, you add that. I think William Zepeda will take another step. Right? He hasn't been stopped. He really hasn't been hurt in his career. He's still relatively young. William Zepeda needs to develop again, and he may be able to get a rematch with Shakur Stevenson down the line. But he must come back better and refurbished after this fight. Floyd, Schofield, and Shakur Stevenson are set for November. Turkey Al-Sheikh is in the works of making that happen now. I foresee Schofield being the strongest opponent Shakur has ever faced and the most sturdy and athletic. It will be a test. It will be interesting. And I could see Shakur bringing even more out of his bag versus Schofield than he did versus Zepeda, because Schofield presents entirely different problems than Zepeda. Schofield is an athlete. Schofield is a rough fighter. Schofield is a big, strong fighter. Schofield is young. Schofield is hungry, and he believes he can beat Shakur. I think it's from a delusional place, so to speak. But he believes he could beat Shakur. Easy. I think that would be an easier fight for Shakur Schofield than zepeda. I think Shakur will watch him in a much easier fashion. Yeah, I'm very high on Shakur. I think he'll beat Gervonta. I think he'll beat anybody around his weight class, 135 to 140. Personally, I don't. Maybe Gary Anton Russell or some 140 pounders are interesting matchups for Shakur. I would say Gary Anton Russell. I'm high on him, so I would be interested to see a matchup like that. Uh, it's the night of boxing, though. We seen at the fight. Clarissa Shields was at the fight. Remy Ma was at the fight. Remy Ma and Clarissa Shields were both at the fight. And on opposite sides of the ring, Remy Ma came out with Fat Joe rapping. Uh, she came out with Fat Joe. Remy Ma Fat Joe came out for Edgar Berlanga. He got knocked out. He was bad luck. He did a lot of leaning back. And we seen Clarissa Shakur, and he won in dominant fashion. Shakur won in dominant fashion. Edgar Berlanga lost. Here's the interesting thing about those two. The interesting thing about those two, the interesting thing about Shakur and Berlanga is they are best friends. So the energy Shakur had in the pre-fight build-up, a lot of that was mustered up and manifested because he was next to Berlanga. I feel Shakur was feeding off of Berlanga's energy. The energy Berlanga carried in the pre-fight build-up is the same energy Shakur carried. That ignorant, that confidence, that arrogance. Shakur had the same thing that Edgar Berlanga had. They are best friends. They were on the same energy. They probably had conversations prior. They both disrespected De La Hoya. They both kind of stood for the same thing. So I feel Shakur Stevenson and Edgar Berlanga, if Edgar Berlanga would have won, I think Shakur Stevenson and Edgar Berlanga could have continued to headline cards together. I think that's the future of boxing. I think the tag team element. Shakur Stevenson and Berlanga tag teaming an event and promoting the event together and also feeding off each other's energy, being more comfortable in the pre-fight build-up because they are best friends. I think the tag team element that we seen with Shakur Stevenson and Berlanga, even though it failed because Berlanga lost, I think that should be targeted a lot more in the sport of boxing. Imagine, imagine if we had more tag team events, as we see with Amanda Serrano and Jake Paul tag teaming cards together. As we seen with Shakur and Berlanga, best friends tag team in his card. We need to see more tag team pairings. Every time you see this fighter, you know you're going to see this fighter. And they could mix and match weight classes. I like when we seen Gervonta Davis and David Benavidez. I felt like that was a tag team. I felt like they could have tag team much more events together. Uh, we used to see Tiafimo and Terrence Crawford tag team events together. You see. So the tag team element is something that's very interesting in the sport of boxing when it comes to headlining a card. So let me make one up out of thin air. A good tag team pairing that would make total sense, right? Would have been like Usyk and Lomachenko. Usyk and Lomachenko tag teaming multiple events together would have been massive. Tag teamed events. That's what we need. especially with Turkey Al Sheikh being able to make these super cars. We need more tag team events. But one thing I find interesting is uh, I feel like Jake Paul with MVP, Turkey Al Sheikh and Dana White with TKO and DAZN. Those are the three major heads in the sport of boxing right now. And those and BLK Prom. Those four will keep the sport of boxing alive. So we must really take our hat off to Jake Paul and understand that he's a promotional company that will be rivaling and competing. MVP will be competing with TKO Boxing in the future. Jake Paul will be competing with Turkey Al Sheikh in the future for the best promotional company in boxing, followed by BLK Prime and DAZN. You guys must remember, DAZN was putting in work, right? And when I say DAZN, I'm saying DAZN as a app. Whoever they decide to do business with will be the other promotional company in the sport of boxing. And it likely won't be TKO or MVP. So PBC, anybody they decide to do, Matchroom, whoever they decide to do, typically Matchroom with Eddie Hearns. He will always have a foot in the door because of DAZN. So these are the major promotional companies in the sport of boxing. So Jake Paul is just as important as Turkey Al Sheikh, who's just as important as DAZN and Eddie Hearn, who's just as important as BLK and all these lower promotional companies. It's impossible to monopolize the sport of boxing. You have Japanese promotional companies, you have European promotional companies, American. It's impossible to monopolize. But what you can do is have a stable of fighters. So it's interesting to see the fighters that these different promotional companies will sign and who will come out on top with the best fighters. And as boxers, they will always have the freedom because they will be free agents and able to negotiate. And so boxing will be that one sport forever and always that you can't monopolize, that you can't make into one-stop shop organization like UFC. Because you can't make MMA into an actual one-stop organization. You still have one fighting. You still have these different fight leagues. But what you can do is be the face of MMA, as Dana White has done with UFC. But in closing, I don't foresee them being able to do that in boxing. What I do foresee TKO doing is treating boxing like a circus. Turkey Al Sheikh has already hosted an event in the middle of Times Square. As he told David Benavidez, he wanted him to fight in prison. Turkey Al Sheikh will turn boxing into a circus. We'll see a WWE event in the same ring on the same night on the same card as a boxing event. In that same ring, you'll see wrestlers do their event, get out the ring, then you see a boxer. And boxers get in the ring and do their event. You even see MMA in the ring. So I could foresee them cross-promoting and having WWE, UFC, and boxing event all in one event. I could see them having a WWE fighter fight a boxer in an event where it goes on their record in some type of capacity. I could see a UFC fighter fighting a WWE fighter in a capacity where it goes on their record with mixed rules. It's a bunch of different things TKO has up their sleeve. So I think they will be turning boxing into a circus, so to speak, and blurring the lines between all the combat sports and taking it back to the 1800s, right, where boxing origins came from the circus. Boxing used to be illegal, so they used to have to hold these events in circus or in underground bars, so to speak. So Uh, Turkey Al-Sheikh he's a very progressive thinker when it comes to the sport of boxing. But what happens is history repeats itself. What you'll find is he'll be doing a lot of stuff that the promoters of the past already did. Because boxing is such an old sport. You can't get past the fact that history repeats itself in this sport in particular. We're talking about boxing, the first sport that when Jim Crow and when black athletes couldn't become champions or even compete in certain sports. We're talking about boxing. Where the first black champion would emerge in the late 1800s, early 1900s, way before Jackie Robinson. We're talking about boxing, the only sport that was inclusive of all races, right? Even though they had their time periods where it was a colored champion and a white champion, right? And a actual champion per se, they're still in this sport. They still recognized colored champion. You still were recognized as a colored champion, and you still, particularly in the lower weight classes, had a chance, the opportunity at winning an actual championship belt. It was the higher weight classes that they feared. So you seen a guy like George Dixon win a championship in the early 1900s, early, like close to the 1800s. Whilst you seen Jack Johnson win it later as a heavyweight. The heavyweight winning a championship belt was just a major deal. That's just, you're the best fighter in the world. So, ironically, George Dixon, the first black champion, died broke. Only 90 pounds, malnutrition. Ironically, the only person that was supporting him was John L. Sullivan. John L. Sullivan, white heavyweight champion, supporting a flyweight black champion. The first black champion who was a flyweight was supported by John L. Sullivan. The first champion of boxing who was a white man. Ironically, this relationship happened because they understood each other's plight. They were very similar and in that capacity. And that's all I got, man. I'm gone, man. Just wanted to ramble and talk dirty. And always like, comment, and subscribe and support. Peace. Boxing over everything.